Hey everybody, welcome back to the Wolf Pit with another episode of What Are We Eating? You, the people, already know that several years ago I didn't even really like Spam. Then, for the purpose of doing What Are We Eating videos, I tried several different kinds of Spam and I fell in love with Spam. To the point, I made my own homemade Spam. I don't know if you would call that commitment, love, or stupidity for Spam, but it was worth all the time and effort to make it, and it was obviously much better than the canned version. If you want to see the video on how to make homemade Spam, I'll leave a link in the description box. But if you ever wonder what Spam from other countries tastes like, well, it's not necessarily Spam, but it's basically the same type of thing. Canned luncheon meat, and I've found 3 of them. But if you, the people, know other canned luncheon meats from other countries, please let me know. The first one we're going to try kind of throws me for a loop, with the name of it and the writing on the can and the country of origin. The product name is Ming, and it's a product of Holland. Here's a list of ingredients, and it's very simple, just like Spam. The nutritional value per 100 grams is 1,140 kilojoules, or 272 calories, 24 grams of total fat, 9 grams of saturated fat, 2 grams of carbohydrates, 12.5 grams of protein, 1.9 grams of salt, or 740 milligrams of sodium. Now let's get it out of the can and see what it looks like. And I want to thank Claire at Dennis for sending me this. And she actually sent it to me a couple years ago, as you can tell by the expiration date. But I'm sure these canned meats will last almost forever. But it's worth the sacrifice for you, the people. So if you're watching this video right now, I didn't die. And this looks basically identical to Spam. Now if you're a true Spam lover like I am, you're going to have a Spam slicer for nice, even slices. So put it into the Spam slicer and slice it. And you get perfect slices every time. And here's what it looks like after it's all sliced up, and it looks very similar to Spam, but a little bit more chunky. So of course we're going to try a piece right out of the can cold, but then we're also going to pan fry it later. And as you can see, there's a bunch of chunks of yum yum whatchamajiggers in there. It has a somewhat meatier, firmer texture than Spam. So into the old pie hole, and down the gullet it went. And at first, I thought it tasted exactly like Spam. But then after another bite, I started thinking it might actually be a little bit better than Spam. It wasn't nearly as salty. I actually prefer Spam right out of the can over fried. The Ming straight out of the can was as good, or maybe even better than Spam out of the can. Now let's try some Canadian Spam called Cam. Here's the ingredient list, and it certainly isn't Spam with chicken in it. Maybe treat, but not Spam. Per 1/6 of the can, or 57 grams, the can has 110 calories, 8 grams of total fat, 2.5 grams of saturated fat, no trans fat, 40 milligrams of cholesterol, 520 milligrams of sodium, 2 grams of carbohydrates, no fiber, no sugars, and 7 grams of protein. So let's get it out of the can and see what it looks like. And I didn't even think they made these key openers anymore, but they certainly do. So if you're of the younger generation and if you've never seen one of these before, there's a tab at the bottom of the can. You have to pry up and stick the tab through the key, and then you twist it. And from what I can remember as a kid, the only ones that had these keys were canned meats. Were there other foods that had the key? If you know of other foods that had the key, let me know in the comments. And at first glance, this is going to be more on the lines of treat versus Spam. So maybe than calling it Cam versus Spam, they should have called it Crete versus Treat. But you never know until we taste it. So let's get it out of the can, see what it looks like, slice it up, and give it a taste. What is this, chameleon meat? This meat was red while it was in the can, and then we pulled it out, and it turned pink. Once it was sliced, it looked identical to Treat. Same texture, same color. Now let's see if it tasted like Treat. So into the old pie hole, and down the gullet it went. And it did indeed somewhat taste like Treat, but it had a weird off taste to it that I couldn't put my finger on. Maybe I shouldn't say a weird off taste, but a different off taste. It wasn't necessarily a bad off taste, it was just a different flavor. It definitely didn't have the meaty texture of the Ming. Now let's try the Compliments canned luncheon meat, which is also a product of Canada. Now here's the ingredients, and again, it's chicken and pork, so it's going to be more like treat than Spam. The serving size is 1/6 of the can, which has 120 calories, 9 grams of total fat, 3 grams of saturated fat, no trans fat, 45 milligrams of cholesterol, 440 milligrams of sodium, 3 grams of carbohydrates, no fiber, no sugars, and 7 grams of protein. So let's open it up, get it out of the can, slice it up, and see what it tastes like. And again, we have the key opener. And I do have to say, compared to the pull top on Spam, the key opener on these makes it a whole lot easier to get the meat out of the can. Out of all three of the luncheon meats, this one looks like bologna. It actually had the least texture. So into the old pie hole, and down the gullet it went. And my first thought was it tasted a little bit fishy. And then I was wondering if I was eating cat food. I don't know. This one was very weird. So now that we've tasted them all straight out of the can, let's pan fry them and see how they taste after they're cooked. Once they're all fried up to the perfect level of crispification, it's time to give them a try. So let's try the pan-fried Ming first. And it got a nice brownness to it. And as you can see, it's still chunky. All the fat and stuff didn't melt in it. And just like regular Spam, once you cook it, it gets a little bit saltier, which was the case with Ming, but it was delicious. I love the chunky texture of it. It wasn't like eating pan-seared meat pudding. Next up was the pan-fried cam. And at first glance, if it wasn't for the color, it would look like scrapple. And the texture seemed to toughen up a little bit. And not only did it somewhat look like scrapple, it somewhat tasted like scrapple. Just a little meatier and a little sweeter. It was pretty tasty. And now for the Compliments canned luncheon meat. And it looked like bologna before it was cooked, and it looks like fried bologna after it was cooked. And it doesn't look too bad. It's still moist in the middle. And it's pretty firm. But when I bit into it, it was extremely mealy. Or at least it tasted mealy. And it seemed to have lost all of its cat food fishy flavor. I mean, it lost all its flavor. It was bland. So here's my thoughts on the 3 canned luncheon meats we tried. The best one was the Ming by far. It had the best texture and the best flavor. The second best was the cam, which was decent. It wasn't great, but it was good, and I would eat it again. The Compliments, I really don't have any compliments for the Compliments. It wasn't horrible, but I probably wouldn't buy it again. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.